Welcome to the Swike Podcast, the only podcast that shares the stuff you didn't know you needed to know about jobs, careers, and life. The Swike Podcast, the stuff I wish I knew earlier.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Swike Stuff I Wish I Knew Earlier podcast. We're here with one of our new guest hosts, Daniel Chen. So how are you doing today, Daniel?
Hello. Hey, Luke, I'm doing really well. Oh, man. It's still, as we've talked before, I'm, still kind of rotting away on my couch kind of vibe. Been out of work for a while, just waiting to start my new one. That's how it goes.
So Daniel comes to us with a background in tech, and he's patiently waiting for his work permit to be processed so that he could eventually start his next endeavor. So that's a little bit about what you're up to now. If you want to elaborate a little bit more on the type of work that you've been doing and what you're up to these days.
Yeah. So I guess typical software engineering. I'm I guess a quick background in CS from U of T. Worked at two different companies, Capital One and Amazon, and now I'm kind of specialized a little bit in terms of building cloud native applications. Waiting to start my new adventure at JP Morgan Chase to help them do their cloud migration. So that's kind of an area of specialties in terms of, I guess, the tech area that I'm working on. I guess some of the things I'm up to now, besides waiting to start my new job, I've also decided to kind of start a little tutoring adventure on the side. I'm building a curriculum to teach folks how to program from scratch, and currently experimenting on my younger sister. So it's going pretty well so far. She's really enjoyed some of the content I'm providing for her, building games together. It's been more engaging than I actually thought it would be. So that's always good.
Great. So we took a trip down memory lane and talked a little bit. What was Daniel like as a kid? So what was probably the earliest fondest memory that you might have growing up?
Oh, man. So my parents and I immigrated to Canada when it was 2006. So I was about 8, almost 9 years old. And I could clearly recall that before immigrating, I was like a very outgoing. I was kind of like, top of the class in a very, in my opinion at the time, very competitive environment. Super. I knew almost everyone in my class. I could hang out with anyone. And the moment I immigrated, it took me a while by a while, I mean like probably, 6 to 10 years to really get myself back on track again. I became really introverted for a really long time until, I started kind of opening myself up again, finally feeling like I've kind of, in a way, integrated with the society here, know what folks are talking about with, I don't know, just about, what people talk about normally here, which it was hard for me to communicate for a really long time. So I guess that's a very short answer, a short version of the answer.
Yeah, and I'd love if we can dig into a little bit more. So talk a little bit about your nature. So it sounds like that you're pretty book smart. So if you're top of the class, means that you did well in school. Competitive, were there like sports in there as well? Or is it just on the mark side? What was that experience before you immigrated like?
Ooh, it was, weekdays were like waking up at about 6:30 in the morning, getting ready for school. And then I remember it's like a full day of school. I get home around probably 5:30 in the afternoon.
Okay.
Sometimes there's a long lunch in between. Sometimes I walk home for lunch. And then I would just do homework all the way till, I recall, like 8 or 9 p.m. And then that's when I may, if I'm good, and if I do my homework fast, I might get like a 30-minute break to watch the TV. That was my entertainment for the day. And then I go to bed and rinse and repeat. And then weekends are usually either homework or like tutoring class. That's a lot of what I recall. But there was a time where I got to visit a lot of places. And it wasn't like I have a lot of fond memories in terms of my parents taking me to a lot of like parks and kind of traveling around China, as my dad kind of worked as more of a traveling salesman. And yeah, I would say mostly book wise, but I wouldn't say I was very book smart. My mom was very, what do you call it? On top of my school stuff. So
Okay.
if I didn't do my stuff, like she'd be coming for me. So I was in an environment where I've kind of gotten into the habit of, feeling that if someone is there to kind of like, really put a hammer on my back, as to say, I'll do my work. But that wasn't necessarily a great thing, and I've come to notice that when I moved to Canada, and there's a lot more freedom, and I wasn't really great with that. And I was kind of went from top of class to like bottom, and I kind of stayed there for a while.
Yeah, so I'd love if you talked a little bit more about that transition. So you're kind of riding high, top of class, very competitive, like you have a lot of good habits. Your parents' expectations are that you get stuff done, and you do, and then you enjoy yourself at a park here and there, get to watch a little bit of TV here and there, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And then you moved to Canada. Now, what was that experience like? Do you recall, like, were you excited about it? Were you scared about it? Or what was that period like?
It's a good question, because I actually don't recall myself having any thoughts about it. In a weird way, it was just most like, oh, my parents are gonna do this, and let's just go. I I guess I didn't really have much of an opinion back then, because I don't really recall having much of an emotional reaction to it. It was that process of transitioning was very interesting, because one of the things I liked a lot, I didn't see my dad a lot when I was young. He was
Okay.
kind of, working. Well, from the story I'm told, because I don't really remember much, is when I was very young, like before preschool, my parents would, they would be working in a lot of different cities, so they would take me with them, but to a point where I had to go to school, and that it wasn't feasible anymore. So
Okay.
then my mom kind of took me to my grandma's place, and I essentially just started school there. My mom would work close by and stay at home to kind of take care of me, while my dad kind of like did a lot of his travel. So I saw him like once a month, and the best part was I get to play with his computer. He had some games on his computer when I saw him like once a month. That was really addicting back then. But when I moved here, my parents, both of them, struggled to find jobs for a really long time, actually. My dad was especially, but he had a very, well, he gets emotional sometimes, but he mostly has a very positive attitude. I got to see him a lot, so I was quite happy. There was a lot more childhood memories that I remember because of, I guess, both my parents kind of close by and hanging out. So I really liked that a lot.
Right.
That was in terms of how I felt. Transition-wise, going to school took a while. I remember, oh man, like it took me like 5 years to really pick up my English, because I
Okay.
just it was a bit of a hard transition. I didn't think I was very motivated for a while to feel that I could get to the level of, I don't know, integration in school as I did before, and
Right.
that maybe because of that I just didn't really bother trying.
And do you recall kind of the first few days where, like, hey, you're in this English speaking? Did you have much English training before? Like, did you have any tutoring in that
Uh,
before? Or?
Not really. I had I remember there was English class back then, before I came to Canada, and I can't really say what my level was. Like, I might have knew a dozen of words, how to say greetings, but that might have been about it. It was hard
Okay.
to understand the teacher for a while. Over time, I was good enough to pick up what people were saying, but I had a hard time expressing myself, and I think that partly contributes to the feeling of being very introverted, and I was very in my own head for most of the time because it was hard for me to get out what I was thinking.
Yeah, and I'd love if you walk through a few of the kind of influences along the way. So obviously, dad and computer is kind of the start of that, and then
Yeah.
trying to, well, maybe being more in your headspace and introverted, maybe that's part of that too, at least from the stereotypical computer science. And then what was the process to, I guess, get back to a little bit more extroverted side and the like getting more comfortable and expressing yourself? Did that, you said it took like whatever, 5, 6 years. So that's more on the high school-ish type time frame where that started happening?
Yeah, definitely in high school. I was very fortunate. I recall specifically in high school because my parents also moved a lot because of their jobs. And
Okay.
I've changed schools a couple of times. And high school was the first time I've kind of stayed at a place long enough for all 4 years to kind of
Right.
finish before I feel like I had to move. But I recall I was trying to meet a lot of people in high school because I was like, oh, fresh new place, no one's gonna know me. All my past traumas won't haunt me anymore. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but I also got out of ESL in grade 8, which means
Okay.
I was going to regular like English classes in grade 9 starting high school.
Right. Yeah.
And that in a way, like friend circle wise, I was kind of talking a lot more with students that were, I guess, like, born and raised from here. Although I was, being in Markham, it's still a majority Asian community here.
Sure.
But I was mostly talking with folks that born and raised in Canada. I was like, it took me a while until there was a friend group that kind of snatched me up through one of my classes in physics back in grade 11.
Okay.
And then that friend group like really helped me socialize a lot more, grade 11, grade 12. And that's when I like started coming out in terms of being able to feel like I was able to communicate and belong to like a group, and that helped in terms of my personal development. But in terms of like how did I end up in terms of the career, I would say I was always decent with math, and I liked physics, those type of like practical math subjects. But theories aren't always the biggest fan until and then I remember taking computers in high school. It's grade 10, grade 11, grade 12, and it was all about making games. And I love playing games. Oh man, I was addicted to games back then. So I was like, oh, I don't like memorizing stuff because I don't want to bother. It's not as interesting to me. I like making games. That was something. But I thought about applying to like engineering for university.
Okay.
And I recall specifically when I was deciding on what to do, in the future. I remember it was like this vivid picture of me like in front of my house having this conversation with my dad, and he told me that, hey, look, son, I don't really care what you do with your life. I want you to at least have a skill that puts food on the table, and then you can go do whatever you want with it. So, you're not starving yourself to death. And to him at the time, like he was like an early adopter of computers. And to him, like computers was the skill that was able to feed you. So because of that, and my liking for games, thinking it was all about it was all fun and stuff. That's not true, but that's kind of how I decided to apply for computer science. I applied to U of T. I didn't apply to Waterloo. This is a really dumb story, but we went to visit Waterloo, and my dad, when he came back, said the feng shui was bad there. Don't go.
So he said the what? The phone?
He said the feng shui was bad.
Feng shui. Okay. Interesting.
And then I was like, oh, okay. I didn't know. I didn't know anything. So yeah, that's why I didn't choose Waterloo. But I applied to U of T for computer engineering, computer science. And I think that's about it. I applied for a backup at UOIT.
Okay.
and McMaster. But at the time, I was like, oh, computers, get a job, feed myself. I didn't really have great aspirations for my life. To me, it was like, I've seen a lot of their struggles just trying to make ends meet. So to me, it's like, oh, having a job, having money to feed yourself was the stability I was looking for. Right. And also, they weren't going through a great financial situation at the time. So that was kind of more of a motivation to be like, oh, get a job. That's all I care about. It actually that actually carried through for a lot of decision making when I was in university too. When I was very job oriented, I cared a lot more about if I was learning in something in class, whether it would help me find a job, and if it didn't, I didn't really focus that much on it. Some of my, you could see from my grades for some of my classes. I remember like software engineering, some of the more practical classes, web programming, I'm getting like 90s, and then some of the stuff I didn't really care about, systems programming, didn't really understand didn't understand the relevance in terms of finding a job, because at the time it was all about web dev. Flat 50s. I failed one of my courses, and I was like, okay, I should probably pass this one because it's mandatory. All the decisions in terms of me choosing which courses to take, I pretty much decided to pick all the easiest upper year courses such that I can just graduate, and all the other times is focusing on how to get a job, what do I need for interview, and building side projects. That was like a big thing. And there's a story about building side projects, I'll tell you that. Yeah. First year, it was one of those career fairs, and this something bothered me a little bit when I was halfway through first year. I noticed some of my friends already got job offers, like internships from Google. I was like, what the heck? Like, how do you even do that? Like, you're like 3 months into school, like you've learned, like what have you learned? Like how do you, like what allowed you to do that? And they were like, oh, I've attended hackathons and I've worked on some of my personal projects. And I was like, oh wow, that's really cool. And those were the first time these terms came into my head. I was like, oh, I've made some games projects in my in high school. I'll put that on my resume. And some of the school projects I've done. And I went to my first career fair, and it's just perhaps one of the startups, one of the employees, and they were going through my resume, and they saw some of the projects on, and they asked me, it's like, hey, like, did you do this in school? And I said yes. And then the next thing he said is, don't care. And then you move on to the next one. Did you do this in school? I was like, yes. And it's like, okay, I don't care about this. Did you do this yourself? That's all he cared about. And I was like, and he grilled my resume. I was standing there, first in line, and then there was a lot of people around me. I was like, I was so, I actually felt really ashamed of myself. I was like, how could I could have been so much better, and that's in a way how that kind of ingrained in my head. It's like, okay, to find a job, to find what people care about, you need to show initiative. You need to build your own projects. Show people that you're eager to learn. They don't just care about school. Oh, and the last part, they don't just care about school. That did drill me in quite a bit as well, and that's partly why I've just, unless I really like the class, I would do the bare minimum to just pass it. Don't recommend that for everyone, but that was like, I had a very clear goal at the time, right? Like, finding a job was everything. Like, I had to make money so I can support my parents, and I could make sure that I don't starve myself. And then I think, what happened then? I honestly never really landed like a great internship. I remember in first year summer, the company my mom worked at had like an internship program for their employees. So that was kind of I was like nepotism. But I really didn't learn much there. It wasn't even software programming. It was like I was playing around with like hardware, commercial alarms. Like I don't really think I learned much. And then I think one of the bigger turning points too. This kind of links to how I've met you, actually. This is through my second year in undergrad, the Entrepreneurship program. Mm-hmm. Now, before I go about that, I just want to make sure I'm not kind of going sidetracking a long way.
No,
If you had want to focus on other questions.
no, this is all good. I mean, we're going through your journey, and yeah, I mean, I'll get to more things, but you're kind of describing and explaining everything, so I think it's great. I like what you said about well, what's relevant for you in school. Again, not necessarily recommended to not do well in your courses. If you can, still do well, but the focus is to land a job. And I would agree that for a lot of folks, specifically for devs, like if you're doing it for school, so did all the other 200 people, 1,000 people in your class, right? But if you do some project off to the side that you did on your own, well, that helps you stand out, right? So if you want to stand out, then don't do what everybody else is doing, right? So I think that's a key takeaway in that. So I love you kept going on the second year entrepreneurship experience. Or I don't know if you have
I'll
anything
just
to add to
add
that
one
too.
point there.
Yeah.
Just like I've talked to some folks on the same idea, and some of them found it very overwhelming because the classwork isn't easy, especially some of the mandatory ones. And I've seen friends and folks like stress so much over, and they're like, "How do you even have time to like?" They can't juggle projects and school and all this stuff. And one of the things I would say is like I wasn't the greatest at it. I've chose all like as much as possible all the easiest courses to pair along with the mandatory ones, and I also didn't take full course loads a lot of the times because I was just the idea that like finding an internship, finding something to work was necessary, not just for me finding a job to graduate. I also didn't want my parents to pay for my school, so on top of the loans, I was like, I needed to find some work so I could pay for my like own food and stuff, so I could continue to go to school without taking a big chunk from my parents. And that's partly why I was like, I'll take less school so that I could build more projects, so that I can guarantee that I can find a decent paying summer internship. I even considered like taking a semester off, right? Like it's once you shift the priorities that way, it's like that's just you can format your school such that you don't have to be overloaded by it and you can't do anything else. But that's just my own take on it. But yes, fast forward to second summer of school. So having said that, it's not like I found great work. And second year, actually, because I wasn't able to find something that was really good, I think I've interviewed for only one internship. I think it might have been at Conrad, but I didn't really manage to get anything. And that's when I somehow was talking with some of my friends. I was like, hey, what are you doing for the summer? And one of them was like, oh, I'm doing this entrepreneurship program. Like, would you be interested to join my team? And I was like, oh, cool, sure. I'll need to find something to do. Like anything that, if I couldn't find work, I need to at least be doing something that would help me build skills, or it'll be something on my resume to help me land my next gig.
Right.
So, and that's how I went through the entrepreneurship program. My friend ended up leaving since later she found it. Before the summer started, she actually landed a job at, I think it was Nokia for an internship. And then there was me and that team. And I think I was the only developer. And the team name was Healthbridge. So which is how I met you. Mm-hmm. That was a life-changing experience, I would say. Like if it wasn't because of that, years down the road, I might be struggling a little bit in terms of what I want to do with my life. And it's not like life-changing in the sense that it might not have much effect in me of the last 3 years, because I think the mindset for me would still just be find a job, be stable. And once I hit that, I'll be fine. I wouldn't think much about everything else. I'll figure it out as I go. But this entrepreneurship program got me really engaged because of the people that were there, like the amount of passion of people that had on just all interesting types of problems. I talked to a lot of, teams and founders in that entrepreneurship program, and they were so excited, so passionate about the things that I'm working on, whether it's in healthcare, it's in education. Sometimes it's just about making money, but they had just really amazing backgrounds and ideas that it was like a light for me well, I guess it was like a second light. My first light was get a job. That was the thing I was driving for. It gave me a second. I was like, oh, it doesn't just have to be that. It could be that, and it could be much better. You could love what you're doing. You could, set your life to doing something that you're so passionate about, which I never thought of before. I just thought of, get a job, make money, and then think about the rest later.
Right.
And it was also at the same time a second attitude that I saw when I was going through school, because as it is with school, not everyone goes to school really knowing what they want, and I fall into that camp too. I didn't know exactly what I wanted in life. I didn't really necessarily enjoy. I didn't really love computer science. I didn't hate it. Like, I was decent at it, but all I knew was just like, I'm just going to get a job. And in some way, you don't really need to go to university to get a job. And I've kind of found that alongside with a lot of friends who were going through, whether their parents wanted them to go just to university, or they just wanted to do they wanted to try this because, they didn't like what they were doing in another program and they heard this is the thing, right? Like, they didn't really have a great idea of why they're doing computer science. And when I went through this program, it kind of gave me a why, because computer science to me now is just a tool. It's a means to an end, but what is your end, right? Like, if like before, my end was just feeding myself, putting food on the table. But now I was like, I mean, it's essential. It's like, it's what you need to do, but that's not what you would want to chase for all your life, just putting your food on the table. Or at least I hope that's not the case,
Right.
So that kind of really given me an idea of, if once I'm able to achieve all my essential needs, there is this other state that I'm striving for, that I want to strive for. And the state is being surrounded by people who are passionate about what they're doing, surrounded by really smart people, and, in a very competitive environment, and where not only I enjoy what I want to do, I can also be the best version of myself, because I want to be so, because it's hard to describe this feeling when going through that program, but I felt like this almost like emotionally attached to this is my final state, that I want to be in, and it's not something that you could be in all the time, and it's not, it's a really difficult state to be in, surrounded yourself by really passionate people. Like, not everyone is passionate about what they do. And I found, just working in school projects, you'll see, you'll meet lots of people in their life. So understanding that was hard. I was like, okay, how do I structure my life now such that, knowing everything I had to done before, now, I'm still going to find a job, but how do I now, stretch that end state and go towards this new thing that I found, being not necessarily in a startup, but, being that kind of environment where people are passionate about their work, or, you're trying to build something crazy, you're doing something crazy together. Might be something, when I retire, or at least your retirement memo, which, I'll look back and be like, yes, I am so glad that I went for it. I have no regrets. That kind of mindset. So, okay, how do I do that? I was kind of going through that whole thought process. How do I get back there again after the entrepreneurship program? Because, I still have school and all these things to take care of. I can't just start a company on my own, because, the financial need struggle is still there at the time.
Sure.
So, one additional thing, I guess, is that I also realized I wasn't very skilled enough. I didn't know enough to be in an entrepreneurial environment, because, a lot of times questions are thrown at you, whether it's business or technical. And, I was still a student. I didn't know as much. So I focused on kind of the growth path that I needed to take in order for me to get to that level. And after, I don't know how many months of thinking, I was like, okay, I'm going to go find a very stable job. But this job but now there are additional requirements. I want to work first in a larger corporation to know, how does big companies operate? And I want to work with the most modern technology so that, I'm kind of at least on top of my game, knowing what the state of the art is currently, building any type of software. And once I'm able to master that, then I can, at least be able to go to perhaps start my own company or go to a smaller company and be able to know what the end state might look like and help them scale from there. Because now I have the experience, now I have, hopefully the money to support myself, to not worry as much. And then I'd be able to chase for this state where I get to work with people who are just passionate about what they do, who want to make an impact in society, hopefully make some money so we don't starve ourselves. And that was the thought trend. And I think that bundle of things I've described just now is still something that I'm going towards at this moment. But a lot of the I guess like I've kind of described how it came to be, how slowly some of these circumstances, situations kind of build up to this more refined goal that I'm going towards. It's something that makes sense, and I can kind of link back to where I've been. And then it goes my first job at Capital One, amazing place to work, working with super modern technology. They were the first bank to be fully on the cloud, working with AWS, super modern technology, large corporation, and it kind of ticked all the check boxes for me, and had amazing culture, which was something I didn't really understand for a while, what that really meant. The only thing it lacked at the time was dealing with problems at scale. Like, because once I've checked all the boxes, I was like, I know a lot now. I know how to deal with the most basic type of problems, how to build for solutions in the cloud. But I wanted to make sure that I had expertise in it. But it's hard to build expertise when you don't really work with very difficult problems. So I was like, okay. My choice then was go to a startup or refine my skills a little more. And at the time, I chose to interview around, just kind of see. I've interviewed for a startup and Amazon at the time, and it became apparent to me that there are certain problems that you deal with at larger corporations at the scale of Amazon that you wouldn't deal with anywhere else. And I thought that was a really amazing learning opportunity that I can always go back to, working in a startup. So I've worked there for about a year, got really tired out. Amazon's known to work you really hard, and that was certainly the case. I absolutely learned a lot. Amazing people, very smart coworkers. I think for me, it just kind of hit to a point where I found, I guess, the trade-off between how exhausted I am and how much I was learning just didn't make sense anymore. And, as you get older, you start to notice certain health impacts of, irregular sleep schedules, right? I get paged at 2 a.m, 3 a.m, 4 a.m, like any hour of the day I've been paged before, within that 1 year. And I've been paged 20, 30 times a day, like a lot of, right? I started to think more in terms of like the longevity of the game. And, that's why I've decided I wanted to take a step back and see what I wanted to do next. Again, right, same thing, come back to the same question. Do I start a company? Do I join a startup? Or do I go somewhere else? And do I see that there are certain other areas of expertise that I still think I want to refine a little more? Now, it might sound a little contradicting here because I was so fond of startups, but I've continued to choose and go to larger corporations. As I've mentioned, I was like, Capital One, Amazon. Now it sounded like I should be working in a startup, and now I've decided to go to a JPMorgan Chase, which is another big bank in the US. And I think right now, to me, it's the type of work that I'm looking for. So I did apply for startups. I didn't really find necessarily the opportunity, economic environment. Not a lot of places are necessarily hiring. And my thought was, I didn't necessarily have something that I looked at a lot of startups, AngelList. I've talked to some of them. I didn't necessarily find anything that was so truly engaging to me that really resonated with me. I think that was not, well, you can call it an excuse, you know, but that was something that I really felt. And all of the places I've interviewed, JP Morgan Chase, in terms of the work that they were proposing for me to do, was the most interesting. They wanted me to like help them migrate things in the cloud, building things from scratch, which building things from scratch really happens in large organizations, like pure new projects. But a lot of times you go and you maintain, you make some new refactors. So this was, in my opinion, something more unique and startup-y, like, you know, I'm taking like a bunch of new requirements and building them from scratch, cloud native. I'm going to be going through all the designs, you know, cost, scale, and all this stuff. And, you know, in the US, they do have some form of scale than compared to Canadian banks or Capital One.
Right.
Sure, they're US, but their Canadian business is very low scale. And I wanted to find somewhere where I had enough time outside of work, so I could start exploring, you know, maybe start some small side hustle on the side, which is why I've kind of decided to choose this path. And it links to, you know, me starting kind of an educational, well, see what it becomes. But right now it's like like tutoring and, you know, intro to programming courses. I've thought a lot. It might sound like it's becoming a boot camp the more material I develop, but well, I'm not exactly sure where I'm taking that yet. But I'm gonna be see how it goes with my sister. Once I develop the very basic contents, I'm gonna ask my mom to market that to some of the other moms in the area to see if their kids are interested. You know, to do some of that marketing and see how that might evolve too as I continue to work. My plan right now, a few years at JP Morgan Chase, and then see, you know, if I want to take this thing full time or, you know, fully join a startup if I find something that like truly aligns with one of my interests.
Yeah, and that's awesome. That's definitely, we're looking forward to hearing more about all these new updates and endeavors, if things are meeting expectations down south, and same with its tutoring program. And I mean, there's a lot to unpack in all that. And what I took from some of it is it seemed a little bit from a framework perspective, kind of like starting out with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? In the sense that at the bottom, you just needed a job, right? That was what was drilled into you. And then you experience more and to say, hey, actually, I can do a little bit more than a job. And there's this other world out there. So once you realize, hey, I can get a job, I can be employed, there's this other kind of folks that are doing what they're passionate, interested about. So now adding that to the portfolio of requirements that you have, and then figuring out how to kind of refine and refactor. And I mean, you still haven't necessarily found that key thing that you're striving for, but at least you're exploring the options. And it seems like education might be in that realm, and obviously taking care of yourself and making sure that when you're paged at like 2 a.m. 20, 30 times a day, that's not good for anybody's health. So making sure that you understand what's important for you, and kind of continuing to refine your requirements, your expectations, and all that sort of stuff. And I'm sure we'll hopefully have you back for a future episode to maybe deeper dive into like getting back into, or how you landed that first job at Capital One, that sort of thing, or any of the other ones as well. And I think before we kind of end off this recording, I'd love if you share a little bit of the Swike, maybe one or two areas that you wish you knew earlier, or would have told young Daniel when in a certain point of his life. What is some of the Swike that you would have liked to had during your earlier years?
I would love to be back, and actually, I do have a story I didn't tell in terms of how I landed my first job. Okay. Now that I think about it, it's a pretty cool thing. But you know, I'll talk about it at a different time. In terms of stuff I wish I knew, I would say there's one key thing, and this is very personal to me. It's a lot of times when I learn things, I can get very emotional. And I get very emotional when I'm learning things that I have to learn where I don't enjoy at all. And I've noticed that, well, I could be very self-destructive in that sense. Like I just not do it, procrastinate to a point where I just like, who cares? I'm gonna fail this. It's whatever. Whether it's school projects or just resume reviews. It's like it's easy. I was going through certain times where I was like, it's easy for me to just say, "Oh, screw it." Like I don't need to go through all this bullshit. There was a lot of emotional. Sometimes it's resentment. Sometimes it's just in a bad emotional state, and sometimes it's just me not able to see the value from the work that I'm doing. And something so over the years, one thing that I've really learned is that I would tell myself, don't let the emotions, the anger, and the difficult times at the moment to stop you from seeing the beauty in the future that you're striving towards. It's so easy to be caught in that moment, and then I would act out on it, and especially when I was a lot younger, I would act out in I don't know, just in ways that was not good for myself. I was like, you know what, I'm so tired, I'm not gonna sleep. I've studied so hard for this exam, and I still don't think I can really pass this. It's like 2 a.m. I should go to sleep, but then it's like, oh, screw it, it's 2 a.m. Like I'm just gonna not sleep. I'm just gonna figure out all right, and then like knowing that it's self-destructive, knowing that like it would not help. There's studies about if you don't sleep, you don't remember most of the things. It doesn't go into your long-term memory for what you study. And like knowing these things, I still deliberately choose to go against what makes sense, and failing courses to like breaking up, failing relationships, right? It's like being very self-destructive, just knowing that I could improve, but I choose not to, knowing that I could do this, but I chose not to, because sometimes it's like I don't like myself, and I wish I am punished. Like I'm almost choosing to punish myself in that way, and that was, and it was, yeah. There's situations where it was kind of heartbreaking, but now, like once you have a very clear picture of how great life can be, and how beautiful things can be when you just do some of these like little things that it's sorry, I'm like losing my words a little bit here, but it's I guess in simple form, it's like that trade-off. It's not worth it, and I kind of went through a lot of trials and errors to really find out that like even when times when it's really tough, it's like I would just now ask myself, do you still want that future for yourself? Because it's not, it's in a lot of ways, it's not just for myself. It's to me, the best future, the best version of myself is someone that is not one that benefits myself only, but everyone around me. And if I'm not able to really achieve that, then sometimes I would say the expression to myself is like hell will let loose, and it's a lot of nasty things come through. Maybe we can, it's, I know I'm talking in terms of more vague terms, right? Like I'm talking in terms in words that only in a way only I can understand, and it's because there's a lot of emotions tangled with it, and it's hard for me to fully unwind that into very simple examples in a few minutes.
Yeah, I think part of that is, I guess, a core skill is learning to manage your mindset is the fundamental part of it, where like for whatever reason you have these emotions attached to different things. And I think a lot of us have been through that where we'll self-sabotage and just like we got to a point, screw it. I'm just gonna like, as you said, like almost punish yourself, right? Because you don't deserve it. But realizing that sometimes the best thing that you can do is just having some compassion with yourself and saying, you know what? It's okay that you don't know or whatever. Just let things be as they are. But what can you do to make things better in the future? And it was an interesting point that you made about even doing these things and this future for yourself is not selfish for wanting it for yourself, because if you are able to help a whole bunch of people in the process, then why wouldn't it be kind of a great service to the world if you're able to actually accomplish those types of things. So I think those types of things do resonate with me, and I think it fundamentally talks about like managing that mindset and letting things get to you or not get to you, and hopefully not self-sabotaging. And maybe we'll go through how you did it, and I'll share some of the tools that I had or went through as well in that. But yeah, a lot of great things. We'll put a bit of a teaser out for those two. One to how you landed your first dev job, even after the only one you had before was one that your mom got you. And then this one about managing mindset. I think those will definitely be some interesting episodes. So hopefully
You've
we'll have you back for
summarized
future
that
episodes.
so much better than than I'm able to.
No, it's all good, and we'll probably deep dive into more of that conversation. But yeah, if folks want to get in touch with you or learn more about you, so obviously the tutoring offering won't necessarily be out anytime soon, but maybe sooner than we think. But if folks want to connect with you, where can they find you, or where can they learn more about you?
Probably just shoot me a message on LinkedIn. That's probably the best way to connect and ask questions. I don't think I have much other social media that I am very active on.
Sounds good. So we'll definitely link that in the show notes. But otherwise, thanks, Daniel, so much for sharing your story. Again, I resonate a lot with many of those points because it's similar but different background. But I'm looking forward to having you back for a future discussion on how you landed your first dev job, mindset management, and probably a whole lot of other topics. So thanks for joining us, and hopefully we'll have you back for a future episode.
Yeah, thank you as well. I'd be really happy to jump back again. It's a great conversation.
Take care.
Thanks for joining us on the Swike Stuff I Wish I Knew Earlier, the podcast. If you like the podcast, please subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you found this podcast. And if you can give us a review, that would be very appreciated. Feel free to contact me on LinkedIn at Lukidanu, Lukidanu, and the same on most social media platforms. And I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks. Bye.